In the winter of 1887, a woodsman in rural Maine made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Deep in the forest, buried under 3 feet of snow, he found a small child. The body was frozen solid, blue as ice, with no pulse. But here's what made this case impossible to explain. The child was still breathing. Slow, steady breaths that created tiny clouds in the frigid air. What happened next defied every law of nature and reason, and the truth behind this case has remained buried for over a century. Thomas Hartwell had been cutting timber in the Penobscot region for nearly 20 years. He knew these woods better than most men knew their own homes. On February 14, 1887, he was working a section of forest about 15 miles northeast of Bangor when his axe struck something that shouldn't have been there. At first, he thought it was a fallen branch covered in snow, but as he cleared away the white powder, his blood ran cold. It was a human foot, small, child-sized, completely blue from frostbite. Thomas worked frantically to uncover the rest of the body. What he found defied explanation. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing nothing but a thin cotton nightshirt. The child had been buried under the snow for what must have been days, possibly weeks. His skin was the color of winter sky, his lips nearly black. When Thomas pressed his ear to the boy's chest, he heard nothing. No heartbeat, no circulation. The body was frozen solid. But then he saw it, the faintest puff of vapor coming from the child's mouth. Then another. The boy was breathing. Thomas wrapped the frozen child in his wool coat and ran through the forest toward the nearest settlement. Every step of that 3-mile journey, he expected the breathing to stop. But it didn't. Slow, methodical breaths continued to mist in the air above the boy's blue lips. The nearest doctor was William Thornton, a man who had practiced medicine for over 30 years. He had seen cases of severe frostbite, hypothermia, and near-death experiences. But nothing had prepared him for what Thomas carried into his office that day. Dr. Thornton examined the child with growing bewilderment. The boy's core body temperature was so low it barely registered on his thermometer. His pulse was undetectable. His pupils were fixed and dilated. By every medical standard of the time, and even by today's standards, the child should have been dead. Yet those steady, rhythmic breaths continued. Here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. Dr. Thornton decided to try warming the boy gradually, expecting at any moment for the breathing to cease. He placed the child near his fireplace and began the slow process of raising his body temperature. As warmth returned to the boy's extremities, something unprecedented happened. The child opened his eyes, not the confused, disoriented awakening you might expect from someone recovering from severe hypothermia. The boy's eyes opened with complete awareness, as if he had simply been taking a brief nap. He sat up, looked around Dr. Thornton's office with calm curiosity, and spoke his first words. "Is it spring yet?" Dr. Thornton later wrote in his medical journal that the boy showed no signs of frostbite damage, no confusion, no memory loss. His speech was clear, his movements coordinated. It was as if the freezing cold had simply paused him. The boy said his name was Samuel. He remembered walking out of his house during a snowstorm, but couldn't explain why. He had no memory of being cold, no recollection of falling or being buried in snow. The last thing he remembered was feeling sleepy and lying down in what he described as the soft, white blanket. Dr. Thornton contacted the local authorities to help identify the child. What they discovered raised even more questions. No missing children had been reported in any of the surrounding towns. No Samuel matched the boy's description in any of the regional records. It was as if he had appeared from nowhere. But the mystery deepened when they spoke to local families. Several residents of the area reported strange dreams during the weeks leading up to Samuel's discovery. The same dream, experienced by different people on different nights. They dreamed of a child calling for help, but not from danger. He was calling to be found, as if he knew exactly where he was and was simply waiting. Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, a widow who lived alone about 2 miles from where Samuel was found, had the most vivid version of this dream. She reported that for 3 consecutive nights, She dreamed of a boy standing in her doorway, telling her he was sleeping in the forest and asking her to tell them to look. She dismissed the dreams as products of her grief. Her own son had died the previous autumn. If you're finding this story as captivating as I am, make sure you subscribe to stay updated on more unexplained mysteries like this one. When Mrs. Walsh heard about Samuel's discovery, she insisted on seeing the boy. The moment she laid eyes on him, she fainted. After reviving, she claimed Samuel was identical to the child from her dreams, down to the specific nightshirt he wore. But here's the truly unsettling part. Samuel recognized her too. He walked up to Mrs. Walsh and said, "You're the lady from the warm house. You heard me calling." Mrs. Walsh had never seen this child before in her waking life, yet he knew details about her home, her deceased son, even the specific words she had spoken in her dreams. Dr. Thornton documented everything meticulously. He measured Samuel's temperature recovery, noted his remarkably fast healing, and recorded conversations that seemed to hint at memories the boy shouldn't possess. Samuel spoke about events from the town's history that occurred before he was born, described people who had died years earlier, and seemed to know things about the forest that even experienced woodsmen like Thomas Didn't Hartwell found impressive. 3 weeks after his discovery, Samuel was placed in the care of a local family, the Merciers, who had volunteered to raise him. For several months, life seemed normal. Samuel attended school, made friends, and appeared to be a typical child adjusting to a new home. But the Mercier family began to notice peculiarities. Samuel never seemed to feel cold. Even during the harsh Maine winter, he would often be found outside in light clothing, completely comfortable in temperatures that sent other children running indoors. He had an unusual relationship with animals. Wild creatures that normally avoided humans would approach him without fear. Birds would land on his shoulders, and deer would graze nearby when he played in the yard. Most unsettling were his sleep patterns. The Merciers discovered that Samuel didn't sleep like other children. Instead of lying down and closing his eyes, he would sit perfectly still for hours, breathing so slowly that they often checked to make sure he was alive. During these periods, he appeared to be in some sort of trance, completely unresponsive but clearly not unconscious. When asked about these episodes, Samuel would simply say he was visiting the quiet place. He described it as somewhere peaceful, where time moved differently and where he could see things happening in other places. He would often wake from these trances with knowledge of events occurring miles away, information that later proved to be accurate. As spring turned to summer, Samuel's behavior became increasingly strange. He would spend hours staring at the forest where he had been found, as if he were waiting for something. He began talking about the others, children like him who were sleeping in different places and waiting to be found. The local authorities initially dismissed these claims as the imagination of a traumatized child. But then other discoveries were made. Following directions that Samuel provided with eerie precision, search parties found 2 more children in remote locations throughout Maine. Both were found in conditions similar to Samuel's, frozen, apparently lifeless, but breathing. Each child had the same story. They remembered walking out during winter storms, lying down in the snow, and then waking up when found. None had families that could be located. All showed the same unusual characteristics: resistance to cold, strange sleep patterns, and knowledge they shouldn't possess. Dr. Thornton began corresponding with physicians in other states, sharing his documentation of Samuel's case. What he learned was disturbing. Similar cases had been reported throughout New England and eastern Canada, always during severe winters, always involving children who were found frozen but alive. The cases stretched back decades, possibly centuries, with indigenous peoples of the region having stories of winter children who appeared during the harshest storms. The medical community was divided. Some doctors dismissed the reports as folklore or misdiagnosis. Others, like Dr. Thornton, began to suspect they were dealing with something that challenged their understanding of human physiology. A few proposed theories about unknown survival mechanisms, while others whispered about supernatural explanations. As autumn approached, Samuel's behavior became more erratic. He would disappear for hours, always returning from the direction of the forest. When questioned, he would only say he was checking on the sleeping places. The Mercier family grew increasingly concerned, especially when Samuel began talking about going back to the quiet place when the snow returned. On October 31st, 1887, exactly 8 months after his discovery, Samuel vanished. The Merciers found his bedroom empty, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. A search of the surrounding area revealed nothing. It was as if he had simply evaporated into the night air. The search for Samuel continued for weeks, but no trace of him was ever found. The other children who had been discovered that year also disappeared around the same time, all vanishing without explanation as winter approached. Dr. Thornton's final journal entry about the case, dated November 15, 1887, revealed his growing obsession with understanding what had happened. He had begun researching historical weather patterns, looking for correlations between severe winters and reports of missing children. What he found suggested a pattern stretching back generations. Local indigenous tribes had legends about children who belonged to winter itself, spirits who appeared during the coldest storms to guide lost souls to safety, then returned to their frozen sleep when their work was done. These legends described children who looked human but were something else entirely, beings who existed in the space between life and death, between waking and sleeping. The final piece of Dr. Thornton's research involved interviewing elderly residents of the region. Several recalled stories passed down from their grandparents about children found frozen but alive during particularly harsh winters. These children would appear, live normal lives for several months, then vanish as the next winter approached. Always the same pattern, always the same mysterious circumstances. One elderly woman, Sarah Blackwood, claimed her grandmother had told her about finding a frozen child in 1823, 64 years before Samuel's discovery. The description matched perfectly. A boy found breathing under the snow, showing no signs of frostbite, possessing knowledge he shouldn't have. That child had also disappeared when winter returned. Mrs. Blackwood's most chilling revelation was that her grandmother had kept a detailed diary of the experience. In it, she described how the boy had told her about others like him, sleeping in the forest, waiting for the right time to wake up. He had drawn a map showing locations throughout the region where these winter children could be found. Dr. Thornton obtained this diary and compared the locations marked on the 1823 map with the places where children had been discovered in 1887. They matched exactly. The implications were staggering. If the pattern held true, these weren't random occurrences, but part of something much larger and more systematic. The children weren't lost souls or victims of tragedy. They were something else entirely. Beings who appeared cyclically, serving some unknown purpose before returning to their frozen sleep. Dr. Thornton's research came to an abrupt end in December 1887 when he was found dead in his office, apparently from a heart attack. His journals and research materials were never recovered, though several witnesses reported seeing them the day before his death. The official cause was listed as natural causes, but some residents whispered about the strange circumstances surrounding his final days. Those who knew Dr. Thornton well said he had been acting strangely in the weeks before his death, talking about going into the forest to find the sleeping places and claiming he had figured out the truth about Samuel and the other winter children. His housekeeper reported that he had been having dreams about children calling to him from the snow, the same dreams that had plagued residents before Samuel's discovery. The story of Samuel and the winter children of Maine faded into local legend, occasionally surfacing in newspaper accounts of similar discoveries but never receiving serious investigation. The medical records were lost or misplaced, and the witnesses gradually passed away, taking their memories with them. But the pattern didn't end in 1887. Reports of children found frozen but alive continued to surface throughout New England over the following decades, always following the same mysterious circumstances. Each case was treated as an isolated incident, with no connection made to the historical pattern. Modern researchers who have studied these accounts note several consistent elements that appear across different time periods and locations. The children are always found during the most severe winter storms of the season. They show no signs of frostbite or hypothermia damage despite being frozen solid. They possess knowledge or abilities that seem beyond their apparent age, and they always disappear as winter ends, leaving no trace of their existence except in the memories of those who encountered them. Some investigators have suggested that these cases represent a form of cryptobiosis, a biological state where metabolic processes slow to nearly undetectable levels, allowing survival in extreme conditions. However, this explanation fails to account for the supernatural elements reported in many cases, such as the shared dreams, unexplained knowledge, and cyclical appearances. Others have proposed that the winter children represent some form of interdimensional beings who manifest during specific environmental conditions, existing in our reality only temporarily before returning to their native dimension. This theory attempts to explain their mysterious appearances and disappearances, as well as their seemingly supernatural abilities. The most unsettling possibility is that the winter children serve some unknown purpose, appearing when they are needed for reasons we cannot comprehend. Their ability to survive impossible conditions, their knowledge of things they shouldn't know, and their consistent pattern of appearance and disappearance suggest they are part of something much larger than individual cases of survival. Recent investigations into historical weather records have revealed that the years when winter children are most commonly reported correlate with periods of extreme climatic stress, years when winter storms are particularly severe and survival becomes challenging for normal human populations. This has led some researchers to speculate that the winter children appear as some form of natural response to environmental crisis. The indigenous legends about these beings describe them as guardians who appear during times of great hardship to guide people to safety and provide assistance to those in need. According to these stories, the winter children are not human, but spirits of winter itself, taking human form to interact with our world when circumstances require their intervention. What makes the Samuel case particularly significant is the detailed documentation provided by Dr. Thornton's medical records, which survived in copies held by other physicians he had corresponded with. These documents provide the most comprehensive account of winter children behavior and characteristics ever recorded. The records indicate that Samuel and the other children found in 1887 displayed several abilities that cannot be explained by conventional science. Their resistance to cold was complete. They showed no physiological response to temperatures that would be immediately dangerous to normal humans. Their healing rate was dramatically accelerated, with minor injuries disappearing within hours rather than days. Most remarkably, they seemed to have access to information beyond normal sensory input. Samuel could describe events occurring in distant locations with perfect accuracy, knew details about people he had never met, and predicted weather patterns with uncanny precision. Dr. Thornton's notes suggest this wasn't telepathy or psychic ability in the conventional sense, but rather access to some form of collective consciousness or information network. The seasonal pattern of their disappearances raises questions about their true nature and purpose. If they were simply unusual human children with extraordinary survival abilities, there would be no reason for them to vanish so consistently as winter ended. Their synchronized departures suggest they are responding to some external signal or imperative that we cannot detect. The fact that they always return to the forest, specifically to areas where others have been found, implies some form of shared destination or gathering place. Dr. Thornton's final notes mention his theory that the children return to a kind of suspended animation state, remaining hidden in the forest until conditions require their reappearance. Modern technology might provide tools for investigating these phenomena that weren't available in 1887, but the remote locations and unpredictable timing of winter children appearances make systematic study extremely difficult. The few investigators who have attempted to locate these sleeping places report equipment failures, navigation problems, and other obstacles that prevent thorough examination of the sites. What we do know is that the pattern continues. Reports of children found frozen but alive still surface occasionally in rural areas throughout New England and eastern Canada, always following the same mysterious circumstances that characterized Samuel's case over a century ago. Each new case raises the same unanswered questions about the nature of these beings and their purpose in our world. Are they natural phenomena we don't yet understand? Supernatural entities with their own agenda, or something else entirely that challenges our assumptions about reality itself? The children themselves, when found, seem to possess knowledge about their condition but are either unable or unwilling to provide clear explanations. They speak in vague terms about the quiet place and the others, never revealing the full truth about their existence or purpose. The winter of 2023 was one of the harshest on record for northern Maine. Search and rescue teams reported several unusual calls about children's voices heard in remote forest areas during blizzard conditions, though no missing children were reported and no evidence was found during daylight searches. Local residents described the same recurring dreams that plagued the community in 1887, children calling from the snow, asking to be found. As this winter approaches and temperatures begin to drop, one question remains. Are the winter children stirring again, preparing to wake from their frozen sleep after more than a century? And if they are, what crisis are they awakening to address?